In many ways, when you think of it, everything we wear, every cloth that we have, has been woven somewhere. Somebody has woven it, somebody has created it, even if it's been created by machine.
It has shaped Dublin in a way that people don't fully appreciate, but it's my mission to make them realise it, whether they want to or not.
Why do I like weaving? Well, when I first started, I really did not like it. Because, first of all, there was a history aspect to it, and I thought, I won't like this, because I didn't like history in school. But Cathy Scuffle actually she makes it very interesting. And it was different. It was more about the social history, about people, rather than about dates and things that happened. You know, it was stuff I could relate to.
Well, the Liberties Weavers began on International Women's Day, 2019.
It came about because local community development asked if we would run a few talks about the textile industry and the weaving industry in the area. It's one of the things I love to do, is try and get people connecting. I
went along to St Andrew's Community Centre, which is just up the road here, where Cathy Scuffle was giving a talk about the history of textiles in Dublin 8, and it just blew my mind, because I have lived in this area, been interested in textiles all my life. I've been working with a textile studio for the past 3 years at that stage, and I never knew there was a textile history in Dublin 8. And that really shocked me.
Dublin was a Viking settlement, so we even have evidence in archaeology in this general area, all around Dublin 8, of finds that related to Viking weaving. It seems they had a thing about hats, so a lot of hats were woven in this area, and we found evidence of that through archaeological digs that have taken place. So that was where the beginning of weaving in this area. It continued on by the late 1600s, when the whole of Irish society was being restructured. They brought over immigrants to live here, and they would have been French-speaking people, so they were the Huguenot people who came to live here. And they brought with them their tradition of weaving, and it was all the other industries that went with it. So they were making the looms, making the shuttles, spinning the thread, any aspect of weaving at all, they were involved in it. So that was really the beginning of industrialised weaving in this area. Imagine a society of wealthy landowners, peers of the realm, their local MPs, they're all living high society here in Dublin. They all have to be dressed and cared for. That disappears with what we call the Act of Union, 1801, when the Parliament left Dublin. We were now being ruled directly from Westminster. You don't feel the impact immediately. It's, there's a few places are closing, somebody hasn't got the contract they used to have, but every 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, there's another decline. By 1829, I found a quote in the British parliamentary papers where one of the earls from here, a man called the Earl of Kildare, gave a speech to Parliament. And he wanted to highlight that 20,000 looms were silent in Dublin. And that's a really loaded statement. That doesn't mean just 20,000 weavers were out of business. Each loom probably had 2 to 3 weavers working on it. But then you had all the back industries behind that. The people who carded the fibre initially, the people building the looms, the shuttles, all of the spindles, anything they needed. All of those people are involved. So the 20,000 looms actually meant a huge proportion of people were now out of work around here. By 1911, I did a check on the census for this area, and there were only 441 weavers left. Because there was such an interest in looking at weaving, and because we have so much evidence of that industry in things like our place names, in things like our buildings, in locations, because that's there, we had something to start with. Because up to now, this area known as the Liberties has been associated with mainly alcohol-based industries like Guinness, like Powers, but they never left place names behind them, they left buildings behind them. Where the weavers left places like Weaver's Square, the tenters where they dried their cloth, We have a few little French place names that have been Dublinese. So we had quite a lot of evidence of weaving here. It was easy then to package something on a historic basis because we had a lot of evidence.
When I saw Kathy's talk, and when I went up and spoke to her afterwards, I said, Kathy, would you be interested in working with me on doing a dual course, just piloting something that would people be interested in combining basic introduction to weaving skills with a basic introduction to the history of textiles in the area.
So we set up 4 taster sessions. We should have only set up 1 because at the end of the 4 we had a waiting list to join the Liberties Weavers.
So there was posters up around saying taster courses in weaving, and I quoted just for my own benefit at home, you know, and a lot of my family worked at weaving years ago and we're always talking about it. And I was like, oh, I'll go and see what this is about, because I'd actually just moved into the Liberties. There was loads of us there, and I knew there was only room for 12. So I didn't really think that I was going to get it, really. And then they said, yeah, there's a place for you, so I started.
So we went back again to our employers and said, would you sponsor an actual program? And that's how it started. We ran the first series of classes from September to, well, until COVID broke out. So that's how it started. So the second year, 2021, Claire Byrne, who was one of the initial participants, who was going nuts with COVID, we all were, she said, no, I really want to take this further. And she was the one who initiated the idea then that we should become an independent community group.
It was just wonderful to see them make a decision that they were going to set up formally and have a chair, a secretary, a treasurer, and to run it like a small social enterprise and see how they got on. But they kept the historic basis all the time. So everything they do, they try to tell a story. And they're trying to tell the story of this area through fabric, through weaving, through their interpretation, more like an art class as much as a weaving class.
We run 2 groups. On a Monday we have a kind of a beginners group. So they're people who, not everybody is beginners in weaving, but they're beginners in the sense of this dual thing of the history and the weaving. You know, the 2 of them are really intertwined for us. So we introduce people to these 2 concepts. Because we have been very limited in terms of space and finance, we've had to use very basic weaving tools. We start on simple tools like backstrap looms and inkle looms and even pieces of cardboard, just to give people an introduction to the basics. And after that I try to introduce a theme. It's related to some aspect of the history of textiles in the Liberties. It's a starting point for people to start exploring their own creativity. Kathy comes in and gives history lectures. We go on walking tours. You know, depending on the theme, like, we do different things. We also have a Tuesday group. So these are people who kind of know what we're about, know a little bit about weaving, and have developed their own interests. The camaraderie, the interpersonal exchanges have become almost even more important in those groups. And then I attempt to guide people in whatever their interests are. So it's not just about teaching weaving. It's not a class as such. It's really about everybody feeling part of the group, feeling at home, developing their own interests.
I suppose what I really like about being in the Liberties Weavers and being part of that group and the extended groups is the camaraderie and the creativity and the inspiration, which is just available to everybody. I've always felt that people should be encouraged, enabled and facilitated to be critical, creative, active human beings. And I think that the world would be a much better place if people were empowered to be those creative people. The use of your hands, the use, just to be able to be creative, I think is just a wonderful thing, and I think everybody should be enabled and empowered to do that. It's funny, some of the others in the group, they smile when I say I like to go out to play. The blackbird that I made with cardboard, with pins, cotton, which is not expensive, which can be gotten like in the local shop. And I suppose it's a way of encouraging other people that you don't have to have a big loom, you don't have to have expensive material to make things.
You get into a rhythm with weaving, and once it's set up, you just get into that rhythm of, passing your shuttle, and it's quite relaxing then once you get into it, and then you make something.
I love the artistic interpretation side of it. I love what they do with colour. I love the way they're growing their own flax, for example, and they're starting to process. So I've helped them out with that. I've grown flax in my garden. I just want to see what they'll create from all of that. To think it's something that was a plant in my garden last year could be a table runner or a button or something this year. That just fascinates me.
It's just such a joyful experience, and just the sharing of that, and I said being inspired, and just, I think it's an opportunity for people to enjoy, and we have some great crack as well.
This theme was Francis Street, the Grafton Street of Dublin in the 18th century. I've always had a particular love for Francis Street. Just walking down the street, it's like seeing a shadow of its former self, I suppose. It's even better now than it was a few years ago, because Dublin City Council are making an effort to refurbish the street and revitalise the street. But it has so many iconic buildings, like the Ivy Market, for instance. It has so much history and so much life. When I met Kathy, I became aware of that it actually had been a major shopping street and also a major route from the city gates across the river up to the north side. It was the only bridge linking the north and the south side. And of course there were weaver shops. In the 18th century you could buy anything on Francis Street got to do with your textiles, from your boots to your hose, your stockings, to your highly embroidered waistcoats, to your wigs, to your gloves. Everything was available on Francis Street. And another fascinating thing about it for me is that it kind of symbolizes in some way the great class divide that we still have in Ireland. On one side of Francis Street you have Dublin Castle and the whole history of wealth and Protestant ascendancy and colonisation in Ireland, which is where the market came for the luxury trade. And on the other side you have Pimlico and Spitalfields and what became one of the worst slums in the British Empire as the trade declined. To me, Francis Street has it all. It has the social history, the economic history, the colonial history, the very high level of skill and enterprise that the weavers demonstrated over the centuries in that location.
I find, not just going out to play, but then also like telling a story. And I decided to do this tapestry, Daisies bloom where they find room. This is true of people too, which really for me is a statement about what's happening in the Liberties at the moment. The Liberties is known as a very vibrant place, a very vibrant community, but I think that the core of the community is really being undermined by the type of development that is happening. People that you will talk to who are from the area or live in the area will say, that they have lost the library, they've lost the public baths, parish centre, the markets, the Tivoli Theatre, the Rupert Guinness Hall, the green spaces. I mean, just gone, No places for people to meet. I mean, you can meet outdoors. And for the young people, we were just to talk about creativity. The Liberties Music and Drama Group, they have no place to meet, right? So there's no place to encourage that musical tradition, right? And the creativity and and just the giftedness that is in young people. It's really important to say that the Liberties has always been a place of welcome. Back to the Huguenots, the refugees who came here, right up to the present day. I mean, in terms of accommodating homeless people and so on and so on. The Liberties is always a welcoming place, but we really need to sustain the community just for us to continue to have that richness and that diversity and the creativity and a joyful sense of being.
there should be an emphasis on people having houses to live in, but instead we do have an awful lot of student accommodation and not enough students to fill it. And when we started, we were kind of told, there's no place for you, and that we kind of just had to say, well, we're here and we're not moving. But I do think there is room for everybody, and there is room for us to have craft. If there's enough room for us to have breweries popping up left, right and centre, and then they complain about having an alcohol industry and impact on people's lives, but we have something different.
There's an underappreciation in the largely commercial world of tourism, I suppose, in what huge interest there is in textiles out there in the world.
I would like to see weaving making a bigger comeback. Firstly, for sustainability reasons. I love the idea of using wool, which we have in abundance here. But I also love the idea of craft and things that were considered normal when I was young, such as people crocheting, knitting, sewing, weaving. Now they're called kind of bespoke kind of crafts, So I like the idea of children and young people still being able to learn these things rather than having to really seek it out. It'll be here in the area, because it would be a shame if it died, considering how big weaving was in such a small area that we live in. So I think there is a place for us, and I think rather than continuously asking for a place, I think we just have to make that space and kind of elbow our way in, which I think we're doing. Our first award we got last year, Community and Heritage Awards, and that was all of the UK and Ireland, because we do go out and we do festivals and we go into the schools and we engage with the people and we make it accessible so it's not at a big cost, so that it's not like only certain people can do it, it's there for everybody. Then we applied for the Star Awards, the Aontas Star Awards, and they're quite prestigious. To be honest, we were all there for, there was a free meal and there was a band playing and we were out just to have a nice time.
And the winners are the Liberties Weavers.
And then we won that award, and it was for learner voice, which was actually lovely because it is very learner led. We're not set to a curriculum. People tell us what they want to do, and that's what we do. The award was sponsored by QQI, which is Quality and Qualifications of Ireland, and it's kind of strange because we don't offer any qualifications. Ours is just about quality and community. So I think that's why we weren't expecting to win, but we did, and it was really brilliant.